I'm Dr. Williams. I'm a former program director. I still love learning and teaching with all of you. And we've got some exciting opportunities coming up through the American College of Physicians in Maryland for you, the students in February, and Mary Ellen, the residents in May. And you'll all have the opportunity to present, to submit an abstract and present a poster, whether it be a research poster or a clinical vignette, at your individual meetings. And our goal tonight is really to help launch you on that wonderful journey. And our leadoff hitter is just an amazing clinician, researcher, Dr. Luigi Ferrucci. Dr. Ferrucci had his medical training, his advanced fellowship training, and his PhD at the University of Florence, a city I hope you can all visit someday and learn more about the history of. We were lucky to attract him to Baltimore in 2002 at the National Institute on Aging, which is a division of the National Institutes of Health. And there's been a study going on since 1958 of the aging process, particularly among patients in Baltimore. And Dr. Luigi Ferrucci has been central in that study for decades now. We are most fortunate to have him present to us tonight. He also is a journal editor and referee, so he knows of what he speaks when he's talking about how to appropriately write an abstract. So Luigi, we thank you once again. I think this may be 7 years now, for your incredible insights and wonderful way of presenting, and welcome again.
Thank you, Richard. It's always a pleasure to present in front of this audience. I give a very, very similar presentation all the times, but I have to tell you that from this experience of working off-site from, the constraint of COVID-19, I've learned a number of things that have to do with presenting in a virtual environment. And so I'm going to update my presentation next year that will include, how do you present when you are in a virtual environment? Because it's a little bit different from, the typical presentation that you give to an audience. And in particular, is the more complex because when you are in front of an audience, you can see the expression of the face. You can just look at the people that are sleeping, the people that are most interesting, the people that want to ask questions, the people that look excited, and then you can try to tweak, your, enthusiasm or your, language to try to get the maximum effect in the audience set in front of you. And when you don't have that, then there are certain rules that seem to work, but we can talk about it at the end. Okay, I'm going to talk to you today about how to craft an abstract. And I know that many of you may not be really interested in writing a scientific article, but I'm sure that many of you will want to write, case report, review papers on specific topics. And a central part of all this activity, participating in a scientific meeting, presenting a poster, presenting in front of an audience, and an essential, central part of all this activity is carve a good scientific abstract. The quality of your abstract is absolutely fundamental. And the reason why is because of one person that will read the paper that you write or will come and, see you in a presentation during an oral talk. There will be 1,000 people more than will glance at your abstract and will know, what you're going to say. And then, because of the speed by which science goes now, they will just read your title and they will rapidly glance some of the keywords that are in the piece of paper or in the screen that is in front of them, and try to capture whether they want to invest more of their precious time to look more in depth of what you want to say. So why the quality of your abstract is important? I used to have a long list here, but I try to carve this more for an audience of clinician, someone like, the current audience. So first of all, the abstract it's important for you. And if you learn how to write an abstract, you will also learn how to read an abstract. And so when you are trying to understand a problem that you encounter clinically, you go back to the literature. And if you know what is the ideal structure of an article or of an abstract, you will be able also to capture from it, much more information. So reader read abstract to define whether or not they need to read the entire article. And in a way, it's also the issue that reading an abstract is free, but in many cases, if you wanted to read the entire article and you don't have access to Medline, for example, to NIH, this can get quite expensive. Then if you want to participate in a meeting, of course, you send your abstract and the abstract will make, the panel that is deciding about assigning a slot, whether to assign you a slot for a talk or a poster. And then people that read we used to have the book of the abstract. In this case, probably more frequently would be, the electronic book of the meeting. They try to see of the many, many possibilities that they have in front of them, whether they want to listen to your presentation or to the other many sessions that are occurring at the same time. And of course, the quality of abstract it's the hook. They attract them to come to your presentation instead of other presentation. So I hope that in this presentation, I will tell you what are, in my view, the principle to write an abstract that at the first sight capture the attention of the reader and bring the reader to read your paper or to come to your presentation. And I think that this is, believe it or not, to me, the most important part of my talk. Because if I can convince you that in order to have somebody reading what you write, you need to write a story. And this is inscribed in your head. I think that they will have accomplished 90% of what I want to accomplish today. And this is true for an abstract, but it's true in many, many different opportunities. Remember that everybody loves listening a story. You learn how to listen a story when you are a child, but when you are an adult, it's the same thing. You read a novel because you want to kind of read about a story. You look at a movie because you want to see something that initially present, a particular view of the world, and you want to see how that is developed. So if you want to write a good abstract, as well as if you want to write a good article, you need to write a good story. And how the story works, how do you write a good story? Well, there are few principles by which stories are written. The stories that are really, really effective, that people tend to be attracted to. And Joseph Campbell, who is hello? Okay, should I go on?
Yes, you can go ahead and go on.
Okay, So the typical structure of the story was investigated by this, comparative psychologist, Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell tried to understand what is the typical structure of the story that works. And this is schematized, it's kind of summarized in this slide. So this typical story that work has an initial part that is the description of everyday life. And then there is some event that called a protagonist to an adventure. And of course, as everybody else called to an adventure, those that are living a comfortable life have an initial resistance to go to this adventure. And then there is something that convinces them that they need to go, that is very important, that they cannot refuse this call. And then they cross the threshold. And from an ordinary world, the protagonist, the first character of the story, go into the special world. In the special world, there are enemies, there are special type of approach, there are ordeal, there are battle, there are fights, there are people that help you, there are enemy and friends. And then finally, when you have won the battle, when the main character has been able to win the battle, go back to the ordinary world and go back to the ordinary world with the prize, with the award that they conquered during the battle that have been so important and fought during the special war. And by using this, they come with the seller, with the Holy Grail, with elixir, and the elixir make life even more beautiful than before. Okay, I think that this structure you're not comfortable with, I want to give you some example of how this is represented here, or probably the most famous novel and stories that appear in this world in the last 3 millennia. So, first of all, the Odyssey. Remember, the ordinary world is the peaceful island of Ithaca. And then Ulysses, is summoned by Agamemnon to attack the city of Troy to retrieve Menelaus' Helen after she is taken by Paris. So clearly doesn't want to go. His wife is beautiful, he has a son, everything is so joyful, but he has to go. And he has to leave the beautiful homeland and go to the Trojan War. And then during the Trojan War, had a lot of help from Athena, Zeus, goddess daughter, and then there are many enemies and many adventures. The journey home, Polyphemus, the sirens, and so on. And then there is an illusion. You think that is home, that everything is going to go well, but in fact, his home has been invaded by this noble young that want to take his wife and his throne. And so there is the challenge with, using the bow on the 13 axis. And then the win and is reunited with Penelope and Telemachus, and the peace is restored in the island of Ithaca. Again, I think that if you think that this is a too old of an example, I want to remind you that if you think about the Star Wars, that is much more closer to you, is exactly the same structure. Is Ben Kenobi go to the world where Luke is helping his mother during the harvest, doesn't want to go because his mother needs him, but then decide to leave. And then there is an encounter with the supernatural, with the Force, crossing the threshold, flying outside the galaxy. And then there is a love for Leia, the temptation of the dark side of the father. And then there is apotheosis of becoming a Jedi. And of course, there is a friend, the Oracle, Yoda, and the mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then finally they win the battle and they go home, and everything is better than it was before. Of course, the story is repeated many, many, many times because you have to have one movie after the other. And again, if you think about other stories that have exactly the same structure, I think that the Hobbit is the same thing. The little Hobbit that is, having a feast in this little home, and is called, to recover the rings. And then Pinocchio is the same thing. Hercules, they have to do the seven challenges, and the Wizard of Oz, where, the protagonist need to go in the mountain and understand and recover something, though they can go back and restore the order in the world. So think about the structure and how this structure is important to take into account and to think about when you are writing an abstract, how this is correlated. So I designed a slide that make an allegory of the story in terms of Luigi's version. So one upon a time, research believed that, and there is something that everybody think that is correct, or there's something that we think that we don't know and we will never know. But there is somebody, which is the main character, that is you, that think that maybe things can be different. Maybe there is a better way to do that. Maybe it's not true that we will never know something, but there is a way that we can know it. But in order to uncover that mystery, you have to go to the unknown. You have to go to the discovery. You have to do your research. And then you say, I wanted to check if I was right or wrong. And so that is what I did to check that. You tested your hypothesis. And then when you tested your hypothesis, you discovered where you were wrong or right. And whatever is your wrong or right, this is still knowledge. Remember that negative results are as important as positive results because tell us something about the problem. We know always more when we get the result, positive or negative. And then you go back to the real world, but this finding should change the way we think. And so we are better than before. We know more than we had before. This is what you want to write in an abstract. And I'm going to try to show you how you're going to do that. So the first thing that come to mind when you have to write an abstract is that it's a real pain in the butt. You don't really want to do that. It's how difficult it is to write down word in front of the white piece of paper. How difficult it is to start writing an abstract in front of a screen that is blank. I mean, I had to write an introduction of a paper this morning, and I'll tell you that before I put down the first word, it took me an hour, and I canceled every single sentence that I was writing. It's a very, very difficult moment when you start until the flow comes from your brain and for your hands. So in order for me to write an abstract without too much passion and too much trouble, what I do, I imagine in my mind that I am in a room. And in this room, there are many, many, many little drawers in front of me. And each one of these drawers has a label. And there's a set of drawers that has a first label called introduction, and then method, and then result, and then discussion. By doing that, I don't have to deal with the entire, structure of the abstract, but I can write little pieces of the abstract, put them in ideally in the drawer, and then, I don't have to finish because I can fill the drawer later on, or I can have the sense that at every drawer that I fill with the sentence, I've accomplished one goal. And so I have many, many different small rewards that cumulatively over time are transformed when I put these pieces together into an abstract. And so if you follow, why did you decide to do this study? That's your introduction. Why is research is important? what specific issue you're trying to better understand or solve, and what is your hypothesis. And I want to tell you this: if you write an abstract, what is your hypothesis is the most important part of the entire abstract. I don't know how many papers I rejected because in the introduction, the hypothesis was not clear. You need to tell to the reader what the hell you want to do, what the hell you're doing, and what you want to demonstrate. And then you have method. Who are the subject of your study? What kind of variable you're collecting? How good are the variables they're collecting? And how did you analyze the data you're collecting? And then you describe the result. Describe the main result, describe your population, and then precisely tell the reader how did you test the hypothesis that you introduced during your introduction. And then you get discussion, give your conclusion. Probably it's worthwhile repeating in simple words the most important result. And then you say what are the implications, what are the results, what further research is needed. You may not need all of these sentences, but if you start by filling one or two sentences for each of these questions, very quickly you have an abstract that is done, and you can start working to refine by adding some of the details. Okay, who knows what is this? I'm sure that some of you have been in Rome, and this is a painting in the Sistine Chapel, and this woman is the Cuman Sibyl, okay? And it was painted by Michelangelo, and that is, I'm presenting this to you because the Cuman Sibyl was a very, very special person who could predict the future. She was living in this cave, that's a story, and the cave still exists in the city of Cuman, and people will go there all the time to ask her about their future. And the Sibyl will write the answer to their question into leaves of the big trees that were close to the cave. And when the people were going there to read the answer, the wind all the time was swirling and changing the order of these leaves so that it was difficult to understand what was the meaning of the answer. You will not know whether the answer was correct, but because of the change in the order of the word, you were not understanding it, or that the Sibyl was really fake. It was not really able to understand the future. But the concept that I want to tell you is that words are ordered in the right way can really improve the meaningfulness and the readability of what you're writing. Words are really, really sharp tools that you should really learn how to use appropriately when you word, when you speak, but especially when you write. So where do you start? To me, you start by not being afraid of being too long. I know that 200 words, 250 words. You can start with 500 and then take off what is redundant and what is not important, where you can combine sentence. And, sooner than you expect, you will have something that is good and meaningful. I'm going to skip this slide because I think these principles are no longer valid. So let's start with the title. So the title is an abstract of the abstract. So the title should tell somebody what is in the abstract. It makes me so mad when I read the title and then what is in the abstract is different because it's completely unexpected. So try to be essential. My mentor in writing has been Jack Kuralnik. And Jack Kuralnik will always tell me that if I cannot convey the meaning of the paper that I want to write during a trip in an elevator, it was not clear enough. So I needed to shorten it up so that it could be explained in one or two sentences. Your title should really explain what you are going to want to say. Some people say that you shouldn't reveal your result in the title, so because it's a detective story, so people should be curious and go and read. But we don't do that anymore. People don't have the time. So I like titles that are completely explicit. So title, as I say, is a meta abstract. So how do we then take sentence and we shorten them up? So one thing that you could do when you have a wordy, version of your abstract is to outline what are the important part of that abstract by using one of those yellow, highlighter. I'm sorry, but I'm sure that is not. Okay. I have to respond. I'm so sorry. Hello? What's this robocall? Anyway, think about this sentence. This is something that I really did. So let's say this research demonstrates that repeated episode of ischemia reperfusion in patients with peripheral artery disease trigger intense and frequent muscle repair episode that exhaust the proliferative capacity of satellite cells. You have 30 words. And of course, episodes of ischemia reperfusion, you can't really avoid them. These are what is you're talking about. What kind of patient, peripheral artery disease should be there, what is the effect in muscle repair episode, and what is the mechanism, proliferative potential of satellite cells. So take this, you assemble this, and then you put them together. Ischemia reperfusion in peripheral artery disease exhaust the repairing potential of satellite cells. You have used 13 words instead of 30 words, and the meaning has not changed. Not only the meaning has not changed, but because the sentence is much shorter, it's much more likely that people will read it and follow it and be curious about it. So the 4C for abstract are the abstract should be complete, cover the major part of the research, concise, it contains no excess wordiness on unnecessary information, is readable, well organized, it do not contain too much jargon, it flows smoothly between the parts. Now, let's go to a good abstract, one very standard one. This is a good abstract. Monthly mass index and mortality among adults with incident to diabetes. I'm not going to read it, but it's talking about the obesity paradox with mortality, so that people with high body mass index, they seem to have lower mortality in spite of the fact that obesity is the risk factor for mortality. And this is due to the fact that there is a very important declining weight that occur in the 5 to 6 years prior to that for those that die of cardiovascular disease, and in the last 3 years for those that die of cancer. This is very well organized. The hypothesis is there. The methods are well described. There's a lot of data in it, so that if you read the abstract, you get a lot of information. And then there's even the founding agency that is a good thing to add, because give mobility to your abstract. Two problematic abstract. One is mine, and no, this is not mine, but the purpose of this, I think this abstract, if you have the time to focus on this, will give you all the information, but if I read you quickly, it's very difficult to follow because it's not well organized. And especially because it uses a lot of jargon and a lot of, abbreviations. Purpose of this study was to determine the effect 6 months aerobic exercise training plus weight loss on basal and insulin activation of glycogen synthesis, basal citrate activity, and AKT, and AS160. You may not know what it is. Phosphorylation in all the overweight, obese, insulin-resistant men. So you have one sentence that is 4 lines. Very, very difficult to remember, what is in this sentence and maintain order. So short sentence, don't use abbreviation, make sure that people understand, and they should not have the specialty to understand what's going on. It was mine. This is the first paper I ever wrote. That was published in the Italian Journal of Cardiology. It was a 46-year-old patient showed spontaneous angina with anterior ST segment depression 30 hours after an inferior myocardial infarction. Myocardial ischemia, which was resistant to drug therapy and induced acute left ventricular failure, was promptly reversed by intra-aortic balloon pumping. Coronary angiography demonstrated diffuse severe atherosclerotic disease, efficacy of intra-aortic balloon counterpulsation. In this case, of spontaneous angina might be ascribed to an increase in coronary cross-sectional area in response to increased intraluminal pressure, passive vasomotion. I'm not explaining anything here. It's really, make the assumption that the reader have already read the paper, because there are many, many things that are reported here. That I hope that I have improved, since my first abstract of many, many years ago. Too many. So my absolutely favorite abstract, which is this one, can apparent superluminal neutrino speed be explained as a quantum weak measurement? And the abstract say probably not. And I think it's very difficult to be more synthetic than that. But you need to have read the title, but the abstract tell you pretty much the entire story. I have few slides. So I was telling you that this abstract has a title that can apparent superluminal neutrino speed be explained. Well, I need to see it. It's a quantum weak measurement,
There
and
we
the
go.
abstract,
Now it's sharing.
and the abstract is saying probably not. Very, very quick, very, very concise, but very effective. And then I'll show you another abstract that is quite interesting, and you will not believe, but this is a true abstract. And let me see if I can read it to you. So now it's called Fractal Analysis of Deep Sea Topography. Was taken by the Book of Abstract of an important, very, very important meeting of the Marine Society, and the recent high resolution mapping of the deep sea topography show clearly that there is a hole in the bottom of the sea. To repeat, there is a hole in the bottom of the sea, and so on. Clearly somebody, make a joke and put this, submitted this abstract, and then show you how, in some of these large meetings, they accept everything you submit without even looking at it. And this ended up, in the abstract book. I think that, these people should be ashamed, but, it was really a good abstract for me for this lecture. Okay, I think I'm very, very close to the end. I just wanted to spend the last 5 minutes to tell you about the abstract. And as I said, this visual organization of a poster will change substantially in the future, because now poster, most of them are virtual. And so when you do a virtual poster, that's a completely different story. It's a completely different art. And I think that we should use movies a lot more when you do that. But, in general, if we go back to normal life and we are able to see each other and to show a poster, that is, the general way I see a poster. First of all, a poster has a central focus here, this part, high in the middle, where you have the most beautiful slide, the most beautiful picture, the most beautiful graph that you have, because that is where the attention of the person that is looking at your poster from far will be. And then you need to create some sort of a flow. And so I think that one of the main main mistakes that people do in doing posters is that they write too much. A poster should be 700 or 1,000 words at the maximum, certainly no more than that. That's why it's because in order to read more, you need time. You will need, 25 minutes, half an hour. Have you ever seen a person in front of the poster staying there for half an hour and not switch to another poster? Most of them, when they see a poster that is so filled with text, they pretend to be looking at that. And then they leave 5 minutes later. And if you want to provide more detail, you should be there. You can provide more detail verbally. And some people also have an extended version of their poster printed they can distribute. But if you want to attract somebody, your poster should be simple, to the point, and have very, very few words. So that is my checklist. Visually attractive, lot of empty space. Don't make something that's too crowded. A concise title, a single message, use large font. Remember that most of the people around above the age of 50 start having problem of vision. Not more than 300, 500 words, but you can do 700, 1,000. When you are at 1,000, is already a lot. May result in the center, at least one figure and table. The clear hypothesis, you can explain it in 3 minutes. You can explain it in 3 minutes or less. And that's it, my presentation for today. Thank you very much for your attention, and I can certainly stay to address any specific question.